So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or good afternoon to who is joining from China. My name is Alessio Bettino. I'm the knowledge coordinator of the EU SME Centre, and it's my great pleasure to be here today and to welcome you to this webinar. So today's topic is about healthcare, and in particular pharmaceuticals in China. As you know, the sector is a very important one for Europe. Around 6% of the EU's exports of pharmaceuticals go to China every year. But we could do more, so that's why we are having this webinar today. And we have two very distinguished guests, two very senior professionals who have been in China for many years, and who will introduce you two main aspects. The first speaker will provide an overview of the macro aspects and trends in the sector in China, as well as the main regulations and requirements and conditions for market access, but also an overview of the main players in the sector in China. While the second part will focus exclusively on IPR. As you know, in particular, the speaker will provide an overview of China's regime for intellectual property in the pharmaceutical sector. We will see that IP is a big issue in all sectors in China, of course, but especially in the pharmaceutical one. And then there will be a Q&A session, which will be a very long one. So we hope that we will receive many questions from the audience. Next slide, please. Before that, I would like to spend a couple of minutes to introduce the EU SME Centre. The EU SME Centre is a project funded by the European Commission, and it has been around for 11 years already. We are in the third phase currently, and our objective is to help European small and medium-sized enterprises to export to China, to get ready to do business with China. We are implemented by a consortium of 5 chambers of commerce and business organizations, and led, which you can see here on the bottom of this slide, and among which there is the China Italy Chamber of Commerce, which is the consortium coordinator, and we are co-organizing this workshop today together with the Italian Chamber. We also cooperate with many organizations from government, business, and in particular the Enterprise Europe Network. And we have a physical office in Beijing, which is where I am joining from. Next slide, please. We provide 4 main services, all free of charge. The first is called Knowledge Center. Basically, we write reports, guidelines, case studies on different aspects in China, different sectors, but also on cross-cutting issues such as HR, taxation, and so on. We have an advice center on which I will spend 1 minute more in the next slide. Then we have a training center. Basically, we organize workshops, trainings on different issues, like the one we are organizing today in the pharmaceutical sector. And last, we have an advocacy platform through which we organize meeting focused entirely on policies, regulations, and their implications on European SMEs. Next slide, please. I mentioned the advice center. Basically, we have a sort of help desk called Ask the Expert, and if European SMEs or chambers or business organizations have some issues, have some specific questions that they would like to ask, you can reach out to us anytime, and we will provide you technical assistance for free, either through in-house experts or external experts. And this could be on very complicated technical aspects as well. For instance, certification for medical devices, or which standards do I need to follow in order to be compliant, and so on. And this is absolutely free, and so please feel free to reach out to us for any issues you have. I would like to give a very brief overview of some activities that we're organizing this month. Particular next week on the 17th, we will have another event on IP specifically for SME, and it will be also offline, will be online, but also offline in Guangzhou. The day after, we're organizing a topic on the green transition for SMEs in West China, and it will be online and it will be only offline in Chengdu. Then we have maybe another event that might be interesting for some of you. It's about funding and market entry requirements for startups in China. and this will be online. And then we have a bunch of others. I would like to mention that we also have a report. We have recently completed a report on the healthcare market in China, which is free for download. You only need to register to our website, and you will find the link here. Then we also have other tools, self-diagnosis tool, and frequently asked questions on our website, all of which are free, and I invite you to visit. Next slide, please. Of course, there will be a Q&A session at the end, but I would invite all the participants to submit all the questions as soon as you have them, and then we will answer them at the end. Next slide, please. Now, before starting, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Valentina Rigoni, who is the Office Manager of China-Italy Chamber of Commerce, who is the consortium leader of the EU SME Centre, and they are the co-organizers of this event today. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessio, and thank you to all our both our speakers and also our attendees connected both from China and also from Italy and Europe all. I'm going to give a brief overview of the China-Italy Chamber of Commerce, which is the only business organization recognized by both the Italian government and also the People's Republic of China Ministry of Civil Affairs. The CACC aims to support Italian business to become more international and to promote the Made in Italy in the PRC. CACC is present in China through 5 offices: Beijing, Chongqing, Guangzhou, Shanghai, and Suzhou. And also we have 2 desks in Chengdu and Shenzhen. This year, CACC celebrates the 30 years anniversary from its foundation. Our member base is composed of over 700 companies in 2021, and it represents the Italian business community overall, so from public invested and multinational corporations to small and medium-sized enterprises, both manufacturing and commercial, to also service companies providers. Among our activities, there are informative events, such as the one today that we co-organize with partners, conferences, fora, and business networking activities. Moreover, we also organize promotional events and other business-related activities and initiatives. Our chamber is composed also of working groups, 12 in total to be precise, and working groups basically they cover the most representative sectors of Italian companies in China. As this webinar today is focused on the healthcare sector, I would also like to spend a couple of words regarding the healthcare working group. The group includes members, Italian companies and local ones that operate in the healthcare sector, ranging from manufacturing of medical equipment, devices, or pharmaceutical products, or also supply of IT solutions. The group is committed to promote the awareness of know-how, expertise, and of Italian products, of Italian companies within the healthcare sector, and to share the industry information between operators to increase the business opportunities within the Chinese market. If you are not a member of CACC yet and will be interested in joining our network or joining our healthcare working group, please don't hesitate to contact us. You can see the contacts of CACC in the slide on the screen. And for more questions, please feel free to contact us. I would like to leave you to thank again Mr. Canepa and Mr. Xu, our speakers of today, EU SME Centre as the co-organizer of the webinar, and also our partners, Confindustria Lombardia, China IP SME Help Desk, Asso Lombarda, ENN Enterprise Europe Network, and Lombardy's Life Sciences Cluster. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Valentina. So, speaking of partners, I would like to give the floor to co-partners.
Thanks, Alessio, for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the other partners for the organization of this event. We all have been working closely with the specific aim of raising awareness on the biopharma, Chinese biopharma sector, which is, of course, steadily growing in importance over the years. Just a few words on our organization and role. Confindustria Lombardia is a federation of enterprises of the Lombardy region. It is composed of 9 territorial associations, among the others Assolombarda, and represents more than 13,000 companies of our region. Since 2015, we are a partner of the Enterprise Europe Network, the world's largest support network for small and medium enterprises with international ambitions. The network is co-funded by the European Commission and nowadays is present in more than 60 countries worldwide. In Asia, for instance, it covers strategic markets such as China, Japan, India, South Korea, and Vietnam. Within the Enterprise Europe Network project, we provide free of charge services for startups and small or medium enterprises in 3 main areas: innovation, access to finance, and international growth. Regarding this last category, international growth, our services range from international business and technology partner search, company missions, to international brokerage events. In addition to that, we have started a collaboration with the EU SME Centre and the China IP SME Help Desk in order to support together the companies interested in the Chinese market on several topics. So in conclusion, if you are a small and medium enterprise and you are interested in the free of charge services I mentioned, you can directly get in touch with the nearest Enterprise Europe Network office in your region or state. The list of offices is available on the EEN website. Specifically, if you are located in the Lombardy region, you can get in touch with us by sending an email to my email address. So I remain available for any further information or clarification. Thank you very much for the attention and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you very much, Marcello. I'll now give the floor to Ms. Vera Codazzi from the Life Sciences Cluster in the Lombardy region.
Good morning to everyone, and thanks to other partners of the event. My name is Vera Codazzi, and I'm the cluster manager of the Lombardy Life Sciences Cluster. The cluster is the community devoted to life sciences in Lombardy region, and it brings together public and private key players and represent the whole value chain from research to production and to hospitals. So we have who does research, who produce innovation generated from this research, and who uses this innovation to give better life quality to all citizens. The cluster aims at developing and sustaining a virtuous ecosystem that reflects cooperation between public and private entities to boost the role of Lombardy as a pole of excellence in research and innovation. Among cluster members, there is Assolombarda. Assolombarda is one of the biggest business Italian association and represents companies operating in the metropolitan city of Milan and in Lodi, Monza, Brianza, and Pavia area. At the moment, it has more than 6,800 members, and 700 of them work in the life science sector. The cluster and Assolombarda work together to develop different projects and activities And main areas on which these activities are focused are competitivity and international growth, networking, advocacy, education. We work also on tech transfer, on searching funding opportunities for research and innovation and information. As concerned, for example, networking and also competitivity and international growth, we organize each year an event with Asso Lombarda and Confindustria Lombardia, with many other partners in Italy, whose name is Meet in Italy for Life Sciences. It is an international event and it is dedicated to the life science sector. The next one will be in the end of September and will be an hybrid event, and the physical part will take place in Genova. Thank you.
Thank you, Vera. So thank you to all the partners for your efforts to organize this today. I would also like to mention that this event is strongly supported by the IP SME Help Desk, which is another EU-funded project focusing exclusively on IP, and it's a great project, provides great advice, very practical advice. And if you don't know the project, I would invite you to visit the website. We will have a presentation on it later. So now I guess we can begin our workshop. Quick reminder: this webinar is being recorded, and it will be available after today on the EU SME Centre's YouTube channel. Together with recordings of all previous webinars we have done. So now it's my pleasure to give the floor to our fifth speaker today, Mr. Valtero Canepa, who is the head of China region of the Bracco Group. Bracco, most of you know, is one of the leading pharmaceutical companies in Italy and has been on the ground in China for many years. Valtero is also the vice president of the China Chamber of Commerce, and he has been in China, as I mentioned, for many years, since 2013. Where he oversees all the group's business in mainland China and Hong Kong. So Valtero, thank you very much for being with us today, and I'll give you the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I hope that we will have also a good discussion at the end. It's also interesting to discuss the big opportunity that the whole sector of healthcare, and specifically the biopharma, is representing in China. So let me see if I can share. You need to authorize me to share my screen.
Okay, call me right away.
Okay, perfect. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Very good. So I will try to skip some parts. So I skipped my introduction because I think it was already done. My role has been already highlighted, so let me go to the agenda of today. My presentation will be focused on three parts. One is the macro scenario, and we'll talk a little bit about the economics, and especially the economics for the healthcare business area in particular. Then I will talk about the market for biopharma, and I will try to explain which are the regulations for the market access, which are the different players which are extremely important for any company who want to approach or who is already in the Chinese market. I will talk about the shift from imitation to innovation that we are seeing now in China, and this is affecting, of course, the competitive arena where the Chinese company has become extremely important. And also we will talk about the pricing, which is under a very strong pressure now, and which is making more difficult to come to China with simply Me-Too products. Finally, I will try to give a little bit of my personal suggestion, but also I will mention some different sources. During all my presentation, I use material from many different companies. I always mention the sources, and I invite you to actually read the full report. Many of those reports are actually available. You can find them and you can go more in depth. I will talk a little bit about the different alliance and partnership opportunities. We will talk about localization, and especially which type and which degree of localization. And I will try to elaborate a little bit on the different options for the go-to-market strategy in China and the biopharma industry. So let's go quickly through a few data. I think all of us know that the Chinese business, the Chinese economy has been flourishing in the last 20 years or so. After the entrance of China in the World Trade Organization, China had a huge development. We became, as you know, the factory of the world. We will see later that it's not anymore just only the factory of the world, maybe still the factory of the world, but it's not only that. And you can see that it's already the second largest economy in the world. Now, what is extremely important for me is looking at the future. I have heard many times people saying it will not last forever. Of course, cannot last forever. Of course, China cannot grow 30% like used to grow like 15 years ago. But when you look at this year and next year projections for the growth of the Chinese GDP, we are still talking about a growth which is much bigger than the one in the US and in Europe, also considering that last year China didn't lose GDP. Actually, the GDP last year, contrary to basically everywhere else in the world, was still growing by 2.3%. This is creating a perception. This is data from The Economist. The Economist has a corporate network of companies in China and all around Asia, and they did a survey among the members of this group. We are a member of this group as a BRACO, and they asked the different companies what they think about investing in the different countries in the Asia area. And you can see very easily that actually, despite the COVID, this was done just after the peak of the epidemic in Asia. You can see that actually China is going to be the favorite place for investment. So companies are very bullish when they talk about the China future. And when we go specifically to the healthcare, actually China is not spending so much. So despite the fact GDP is very large, in terms of the percentage of the GDP which is spent in healthcare, China is well below basically many other countries. And you can see that Italy is quite virtuous from this point of view. Other countries in Europe are in the range between basically 9 and 12%. The US are an outlier with extraordinary expenses, which is not corresponding actually to a quality of the healthcare situation in the system in the US, which is close to 17%. So China is spending more, is growing a little bit, but still not spending enough. And you can see here when you look in terms of the actual money spent, so not so much a percentage, but a real money. You see, China is extremely low. So this is telling us that there is already an opportunity. As you will see later, the market is pretty big, but it's telling us the market will grow because China will invest more in healthcare. One of the drivers is the aging of the population. As in many other countries, the percentage of people over 60 or over 70 is growing in China as well. You see the life expectancy is starting to be in line with the one of most of the developed countries. And the female are already not so far from 80-year-old, which is pretty good if you compare to what was the situation just 20 years ago. So China made a huge jump, and this is good on one end. On the other hand, obviously, it's going to create more cost, it's going to be more demand, and is one of the reasons for which the healthcare expenditure in China is supposed to grow quite importantly, both in absolute numbers as well in the percentage of the GDP. Again, this is Economist data. And we can understand that, one thing about China is that China is extremely helpful in helping us to understand where they are going. So the Chinese government, as you may know, is releasing every 5 years a 5-year plan. And they write what they want to do, and then they do what they write. It's extremely interesting to analyze the previous years, the previous 5 years plans, and see how China was extremely consistent in trying to implement as much as they could the objective and the actions listed in the 5-year plan. As you can see, in one of the 10 most important objectives is what they call the public well-being and when you go a little bit deeper, you can see that one of the point is healthcare in general, and another point is specifically the elderly care that I already mentioned. So when we go more and deeper, we can see that the direction for which China, where China want to bring the healthcare system is, first of all, the system should be public. So still there is a private system in China, but the dominant system is the public one, and the government want to go in that direction. Obviously, we cannot say the system today is perfect. There is improvement to be done. The Chinese government is well aware of this, and they are going through a reform of both the medical sector and, generally speaking, of the health and well-being sector. One of the ways to do that is to improve the medical insurance system for all the people. Doesn't matter if they live in the urban cities or in the rural areas. And now I would say everyone in China has a kind of medical insurance, public medical insurance paid by the government, paid by the people from the salary, but is not enough. So there is a need for improving this system and also making it more homogeneous across the country, making more fair. Today, there is much less accessibility in the rural areas, in the remote areas, versus what you can see in the most developed area, which is along the eastern coast of China. One of the objectives is traditional Chinese medicine, sport, as mentioned, and it's very interesting that they use the word patriotic linked to health. So it's extremely important to understand that the government is putting this, and the party, the Communist Party of China, which is managing the country, is putting this as one of the most important objectives for the next 5 years. But this shouldn't surprise us. Already in 2016, there was a very important publication called Healthy China 2030. And when you read this in deep, you can see specifically the KPI. So not only they were making, they were explaining their desire, but actually they went in deep to measure, to say how they will measure the improvement. So they started from the baseline, which was 2015, and then they put there the objective for 2020 and 2030. And I can tell you that honestly, they are really trying to reach those objectives. Of course, COVID was not helping to reach the objectives in 2020, but I can say that they will probably go very close if they will not reach the objective 2030. Now, in the next few slides, I will try to explain you some of the way they try to do this. In this moment, the China healthcare market is having a very strong growth momentum. You can see that these are data coming from different sources, but actually this line is coming from McKinsey, and I think probably 6% is even too low. One of the reasons for which you will see later, one of the reasons for which is only 6% is because there is a big price cut. But we look at the volume and if we look at the innovative products, then the growth will be much, much bigger than 6%. So the value is already quite important, both for the pharmaceutical as well for the medical technology market, which is more on the right side. And you see that is already quite important, and the growth is expected to be even bigger than the one of the pharmaceutical. So in 2025, the pharmaceutical market will account for $180 billion, and very likely the medical technology market will account for another $100 billion. So we are talking about huge opportunities for the companies coming from Europe to position their product and services in this market. But it's not just the future. Today is already happening. So when you look at the sales of some of the very big companies in healthcare, you see that China and in general Asia Pacific are representing a very large part of their global sales. So there is, up to the point of for GE, where you see that 26% of the sales of the global sales of GE are actually coming from Asia and Asia Pacific. These are data coming from Deloitte. Let me move ahead. Now, let's talk about market access. I will spend probably 3 or 4 minutes on this slide because this is a little bit complicated for those of you that are not familiar with China. So let's go as a logical thinking, let's go up. So we start from, we want to bring to China products. How we bring it, doesn't matter if it is a pharmaceutical or a medical device, there is one entity of the government, which is called National Medical Product Administration. This is a quite recent name. It used to be called State FDA, China FDA, different names, but in the end, it is the same agency. Recently, the power of this agency was increased. So I would say today is the only very, very important entity for whoever wants to approach China. They have, like, for instance, the American FDA, they have a technical entity inside, which is going to be a kind of internal advisory board, which is evaluating the different technologies and different products coming to China. They give advice for designing clinical trials, and finally, they will approve and they will release the license for the products. The power, I would say, is probably the same, and I put here two. Let's say two. This is my personal interpretation, my personal opinion, but two factors which I believe are very important. One is the power of these entities. The other one is the difficulty of this step. I would say clinical trials and approval of product in China are getting easier. The time is getting shorter, especially for innovative products. So it's extremely important that you prepare well, but if you are able to do a clinical trial in another country, it will not be so difficult to do the trials in China as well. And as you will see later, the time of bringing to China product after the approval in Europe and the US is gone. Now we need to consider China in the integrated global plan of development of the products. And some companies are already starting to start first in China, the registration, and eventually then move to other countries. So once the product is approved, we go to the next step, which is the launch. And obviously part of this is the pricing. Now there is another entity, which is the National Healthcare Security Administration. This entity is actually playing in many of these steps in this kind of staircase, and actually is an entity which is becoming more and more important because it is absorbing the role of other entities that used to be there in the past. Even here, in theory, the pricing, obtaining the price and launching the product in China is getting easier. And this is linked to the next step, which is the reimbursement inclusion. There is a national reimbursement list. The product has to be listed here. There will be a national price, which will be the price which the hospital will basically invoice to the patients, which on the other hand will receive from the insurance the reimbursement. This is getting easier, but is getting easier to get approved in the listing, but it's getting more challenging in terms of the pricing, or if you want to, in terms of the reimbursement, because now China is starting to compare not only the same molecules like they used to do in the past, or the same categories, but now they look around the value around the world, and the prices around the world, and they look around the product of the same, with the same therapeutic or diagnostic indication, and they use this as a reference. So the next product will be very unlikely to receive a price will be higher than product of the same type in the market, despite the fact that it is a new molecule. I'm not talking about generics, I'm talking about new molecules. So again, difficulty lower, but the power of this entity is getting up, which means the power of the companies is getting lower. The next one is a big challenge. I will talk about this for a moment later. I will have a specific slide, but today in China, the government is trying to reduce the price of pharmaceutical as well of high-priced medical devices. And one way to do that is to do national procurement, and it's the so-called volume-based procurement, VBP. You may have read about this. It's already quite advanced, and I will tell you some data, some quite amazing data in terms of the price cut that China was able to obtain. The price in China of certain drugs used to be pretty high. Now it's not anymore. And again, this is where the NHSA is playing a very important role. If you have local procurement, like provincial procurement, for some of the products which are not on the national list yet, there is a provincial procurement. So also the local entity, which are basically the same of the National Healthcare Security Administration, but at a provincial level. When I say province, remember that in China, we're talking about 60, 70, even 100 million people. So it's a huge country, basically. They are getting more powerful, and the power of negotiation of the companies is getting lower and lower. Again, it depends on the level of innovation. So innovation is a key word we will use many times during my presentation. Now there is another challenge, which is the payment. There is already pilot in many different cities and many different hospitals of DRG. You know, DRG is a one lump sum payment depending on the diagnosis at the entrance in the hospital. And this is also linked to the diagnostic and therapeutic pathways that China want to implement in order to avoid the very, let's say, very, very different management of the patient, which are used in different hospitals all across the country. So here again, there is the NHSA, which is playing a role. There is hospital administration as well, which are playing a role, because of course, once they get one lump sum, whatever they do, obviously they will try to reduce again the price. So if a product will not end up in the national or in the provincial volume-based procurement, very likely will end up in competing not only anymore against other products of the same category, but also against other therapeutic pathways. So instead of doing, let's talk about my business, which is diagnostics, instead of doing ultrasound, you may do a CT. Instead of doing CT with contrast, you may do an MRI without contrast. And if you obtain the same, then the hospital maybe will shift for that because we'll make more margin. Anyhow, in any case, you need to pass through one more step, which is the hospital listing. And this is not easy at all. Again, depends on the level of innovation. For a me-too product, is quite difficult. It's getting, I would say, more and more difficult. So the hospital are trying to reduce rather than increase the number of products on the shelf. And finally, there is the prescription. And here is where the physicians are playing a very important role. Their power is anyhow going down, again, especially for Me Too, and that is going to zero when it's talking about generic. And so the difficulty for the companies is increasing because it was quite common to have thousands of sales reps in the field. And now, obviously, this is not going to be enough. It's not going to be, very often, it's going to be totally useless. And there is much more to be done in terms of health economic, in terms of health technology assessment, cost effectiveness, and being able to dialogue with all the entities that you see here, all the stakeholders that I listed in this slide. Pricing, as I say, price is under a very, very big challenge. The VBP has been already implemented. We have seen already 4 rounds of VBP after a pilot, which was called the 4+7. This was the idea to try in a smaller scale, so they did it. They went already down a little bit with the price. And when you see this chart on the right side, you can see that the price cut has been increasing, sorry, every new round. So in the pilot, the cut was around 35%. In the second one was also not so big in the first round, but then as soon as you move to the second round, third round, and fourth round, you see that the price cut from the original market value to the contracted value is very low. Now, this is not only driven by the price cut, it's also driven by the fact that the contracted value is not covering the whole use of that product. So the hospital will only guarantee a certain percentage to the winner. The winner will take a whole province. As I said before, province could be 100 million people. But then you will have that molecule in the whole province for a certain percentage, which depends on the number of the players. It's a pretty complicated mechanism, but let's say 70%. So you have 70% of the volume which was used the previous year that will be guaranteed to you, but with a price cut which goes from 65 to even 85% versus the previous average price in the market. So you understand it's a huge challenge. Obviously, the drugs which have been included in this negotiation are not every. I mean, until April 2021, there were 157. This is not included the round fifth, which was done already, but will be implemented in 1 or 2 months from now. In the round fifth, the number of drugs was quite big, so it's basically doubling this number, but still is, let's say, under brackets, 300 drugs or something like that is not a huge number, but they represent, of course, the government is very precise in this. They go for the big part. So they represent the most used, which means also the most expensive in terms of the total money involved for the public health system. So that's not enough. Medical devices are also under a big challenge. So as you see here that there were even articles on the web, there is many comments on this. It was even more surprising that what happened in the pharmaceutical. So we had a product like stents for coronary artery treatment that went down from 13,000 yuan, which was very high, much higher than what we normally have in other countries, to 700 Chinese yuan, which is basically 85 euro. So imagine the price cut, imagine how difficult, and you may think this is only done by the local companies, low-level companies. That's not true. If you look at the lower part of the slide, you see that actually very low price was offered even by big international companies such as Medtronic, Boston Scientific, and others. So this is a huge change in the market, which we are going through. And again, it depends on the capability to innovate. Now, there is another challenge, which is the competition by the local companies. There is a kind of rumor that China is favoring Chinese companies. And I want to be precise here. China is favoring companies working in China, not necessarily Chinese companies. You will see later there is incentive released recently from the Shanghai government, and they are not only for Chinese companies, but for any company which is operating in Shanghai with certain characteristics. Anyhow, yes, it's true that China wants to get a very large share of the market, not only in China, but at the global level, in a certain number of sectors. There was a very important document published in 2015 by the State Council, which is basically the Council of the Ministers of China. It's called Made in China 2025. And you see on the left of this slide the list of the sectors which they were indicated in that document. As you can see, both biopharm and high-performance medical devices were specifically indicated. And just a few examples is not so difficult, actually, in theory, to substitute international companies with local companies, because China now has big companies in almost every sector. And when you look at, as I mentioned already, for instance, stenting, you look at the pacemaker, you look at product at high value, consumable at high value, you see here that companies like Lepu, even more Microport. Microport is a Chinese company, but actually it is now a multinational coming from China. And this is true as well in the in vitro diagnostics, as well in the imaging, where now company like Mindray, they are extremely strong, not only in China, but also outside China. So again, is not just by Chinese, but actually is surely by made in China. And this is made easier for China because China is moving quite fast from imitation to innovation. It is true that Chinese companies starting just basically producing generics or even copies before China entered the WTO. They were producing products still under patent, covered by patent, but that was something that is not anymore true. China has a huge technical capability, scientific capability, huge investment in science and technology, a huge number of publications, of patents every year. And in 2019, for the first time, 22% of all international patent applications were done from China, and this was even more than the US. So this is also coming from the fact that a huge number, 4.2 million of former students, Chinese students that studied abroad in the US, Australia, UK, and so on, came back to China, and now they're working in the industry, they're working in the government, many in the universities. So the brains are coming back, and they're bringing with them the knowledge and the methodology of work that they learn in other parts of the world. And you see here the technologies transfer from university to companies is largely impacting the medical biotech industry. 22%, and is quite big. Now, the wave in the Chinese biopharma are three. This is a Boston Consulting Group document, which is showing the generic are fading out, are still there, they will be still there, but they're fading out. There was the fast follow. Now we are moving where we are today. We are already seeing innovation 2.0, which means expansion of indications. So drugs which were approved by other companies in China with certain indication, now the local companies are actually expanding the indication to new areas. And there is a new mechanism of action, new modalities. So it's changing radically and very, very fast. The role of China medical global research is increasing. Many Chinese doctors and scientists are becoming leading principal investigators, 12% at the global level in the period from 17 to 21. And this is also due to the fact that the government is providing incentive for scientific and technology companies based in China, innovative companies, and they are monetary incentive. They are giving they're giving tax rebate, they are reducing the corporate income tax from 25 to 15%. And this is happening both at the national level as well locally, like in Shanghai, where recently the Shanghai government published a very important document in May 2021, showing a very high interest of having more biomedicine, more biomedical, more medical device company bringing to Shanghai their R&D center, not only the production, as well the production, but also R&D center, doing research in Shanghai, doing made in Shanghai products. And this is encouraged with very large investment, up to 40% of the R&D expenditure, which are done in Shanghai. So is not just anymore encouraging generic companies. This is encouraging new products company from me better to actually completely new product coming to the market in few years. And also there is incentive for, of course, a Chinese company to go abroad, but this policy, again, is not only for Chinese companies, but is also including the units based in Shanghai of foreign companies. When you look at the situation of the IPOs, you see that actually China is already accounting for a large part, 34% of the total IPOs are coming from China. You see the top IPOs in the first 6 months of this year, and they are coming, many of them are actually coming from China already. So not only the Chinese companies are growing locally, but they are ready to expand themselves and go, for instance, to the NASDAQ and get the evaluation of the market in the US of their technology. They are also very active in M&A. You see that the number of M&A in Asia Pacific has been bigger than the one in the Americas in 2021, although the value of the average value of transactions is still smaller in the Asia Pacific versus the US. But it's not anymore just M&A in one direction. So it's not anymore multinational company coming to China and buying companies or giving to the companies in China their products. Now we see the opposite as well. Now we see multinational companies actually acquiring the rights for the commercialization outside China or inside China of products which are developed by local companies. And when we talk about localization of international companies in China, I want to mention this because it's extremely important. It's not anymore just commercial. When we talk about commercialization, we are already seeing a large number of companies, both in pharma as well in medical devices, medtech, which are creating R&D centers, which are creating innovation hub to take advantage of the huge number of startups which are today in China, trying to invest in startups and then later on potentially maybe have a pull option and take the technology and then sell it in China as well abroad. So this is a very hot area today. We are seeing this happening every day. Literally every day we see more and more localization. Now let's move to the last part of my presentation. So having known what is the situation of China from an economical point of view, from a healthcare market point of view, the competition, the way to enter the market, monetary access, here this slide, which is coming from Deloitte, I think is a very interesting one. It's very crowded. I hope you have time later to see in the registration recording of this webinar to have more time to go through this. But basically, this is saying that depending on who you are and depending on which is your product, which means also the barrier for the regulation, the IP, we will listen later, the colleague that will talk about IP, how deep is your pocket, how much money you have available to make the investment, you may decide between different types, which is like pure imports, direct investment, as well, contract partnership or joint venture. I prefer to show to you this table, which I did myself, following a little bit that scheme, and because I think we need to analyze more criteria, more factors. One is the value capture. I mean, if you have a very high level technology with a lot of innovation, then probably you want to capture more of the value. If you care about the ownership of the brand, you probably should be having your own capability to promote in China. While at the contrary, if you are very worried about legal risk of making business in China, you should probably choose to find a commercial partner that will take care of the promotion in China, and you will basically only produce it. So the way I see this is a multivariate kind of way of analysis. Now, you have to go more in deep, and I try to simplify here because it's not easy to simplify. So I try to put basically 4 criteria only: the innovation level, the size of the business, the capacity of investment, so the pocket, and the acceptance of risk. And you see that when you go to view, then you see quite easily which model is probably the best for the different type of company. So, of course, SME may have a limited investment capacity, so it will not be easy for SME to go direct in China, establish a full-fledged company, while probably bigger company will do that. But SME, they still have opportunities for joint ventures, for commercial outsourcing, and this depends a lot on the capability, for instance, of innovating and on the size of the business. So my advice is do not jump to China without being prepared. So you need competencies and tools. You need soft skills. We never talk about this. This is extremely important. You need culture, political skills. You need to be able to manage diversity. Diversity is not just by ethnic groups, Chinese versus Europeans, but is also by gender, is also by age. It's quite complex. The generations in China are very, very different. There is a need for being able to deal with Chinese people, and this is coming from soft skills. You need to be knowledgeable. You need to know very well the regulation, the market size, dynamic, specifically for the business sector. IP, I mean, today you get the opportunity to learn more about IP. This is extremely important. And you need to be able to know what is the digital environment in China. You know, today we are using Zoom. Just to give you an example, Zoom in China is not anymore supported. So this is using a Zoom based in the US because Zoom decided to get out of the Chinese market in order not to jeopardize their presence in the US. And this is just an example. In China, we do not have Google. To go to Google, you need to use a software which are basically anonymizing you and cheat the block from the Chinese firewall. This is illegal. So there is a certain number of things that you need to know. And you need to know that in China, there is one product which is called WeChat, Weixin in Chinese, which is having 1.2 billion users. And this is a mix of Facebook, e-commerce, Zoom, Teams, and payment as well, WhatsApp. So it's all together in one platform. So you need to know the digital environment, and then you need to be a very deep and thorough analysis of your strategy, and then being able to focus and follow your words. In China, very important, you need to understand how much you want to localize, how much you want to localize processes. HR management is extremely important to be localized because China has a very low percentage of unemployment, for instance. So if you believe you can treat the Chinese employees in a certain way, you are wrong. You should have a different way, which is the Chinese way. In China, size matters. That means that Chinese people like to work with big, or in any case, a company with big project, big future. And credibility comes from commitment. And then finally, please, if you want to come to China and you want to have someone based in China, please don't send the only one who is available to go. Send your best people to China. And this is going to be the only way to be successful. Thank you for your attention. And these are my contact information, including my username on WeChat, for those of you that already know WeChat. Thank you so much. And I will stop the sharing of my screen.
Thank you very much, Valtero, for the great presentation full of insights. I particularly liked I found very interesting the slide you had on the different levels of difficulties for different activities. I found it very, very interesting. And maybe I would like to ask you one question. Maybe we can do it later, but a question that we as SME Center have been asked in the past, for instance, how feasible, how difficult it is for European companies to get actually listed on the procurement catalog, and actually whether it even makes sense, considering that the prices are very low through invoice policy, prices are that low, whether it makes sense at all to try it, because trying it costs many resources. So maybe we could go through this after this after the presentation of Mr. Xu. I would like to remind all the participants that to write your question in the Q&A session if you have. We're going through them at the end. I also shared a link in the chat of the healthcare report that the SME Center has produced. And actually, we're also working currently, we mentioned in the presentation, some subsidies, some incentives that local administrations give in China. And we at the SME Center are actually working on a guide, on a mapping of all this kind of incentives, which will tell you what kind of incentives are available, not only in terms of tax, but also in terms of for instance, R&D expenses or beginning operations, or if startups become profitable and so on. And so follow our channels, and you will, this will be ready in a couple of months. So now it's my great pleasure to welcome the second speaker, Mr. Xu Jian, who is the expert of the IPR, China IP SME Help Desk, which I mentioned before, is another project funded by the European Union. And at the same time, he's also the head of IP practice at Golin China office. He's Dr. Xu is a dually qualified Chinese lawyer and a patent trademark attorney. He has been involved in IP practice for more than 10 years. He has handled all aspects of IPR in business, including drafting, prosecution, acquisition, enforcement, and licensing of patents, trademarks, and brand design rights, copyright, and content. What makes Dr. Xu very unique is that his academic background is also in the biochemistry field. So he's the very, very important renowned expert in the field, and it's our great pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alicio, for your introduction. So also, I want to comment that I've been working in the China IP law field for 15 years, and in addition to my daily work, I also provide a weekly update on LinkedIn about China IP updates. So if you are interested, you can actually connect with me on LinkedIn, and you can receive my weekly updates on China IP. So I think I have a lot to cover for 30 minutes, so I will just dive into the topic. So maybe I can share my screen here.
Okay, we can see your screen.
All right, good. So let me go to the slide. So okay, so the agenda of my talk will be in 4 sections. So the first section, I will give an overview of the IP law landscape in China for biopharma sector. And second, patents are the most important IP right for biopharma. So we'll look at how to register and how to enforce patents in China with some case studies. And the third, we'll look at how you can protect your trade secret and use it effectively. And finally, we'll look at how you can protect your company and the product brand through a trademark. So let's look at the first section, the overview of Chinese IP law and how it relates to biopharma. So, so China is really very much, I would say, harmonized with international standards. So all the Euro IP rights and tools that are available in Europe are basically available in China. So you can see that the typical IP rights here. So China will have patents, trademark, and copyright, the 3 traditional IP rights. And I think worth mentioning for patents, China actually has a broader definition of patents than Europe. So I think in Europe, when you talk about patents, normally you only talk about invention patents, but in China, it can cover not only emission patents, but also a so-called utility model, a small invention, which are covered later, and design patents. And yeah, trademarks is very important. Like we are talking about like company like Pfizer and their drug Viagra, they are all important brands worth a lot of money. Copyright may be less relevant, but I think sometimes like the packaging of the drug or the menu of the drug can be protected with copyright. And trade secret is actually another big area, because in the biopharma sector, there is a lot of trade secret and know-how, and these are recognized and protected in China. So a well-known example worldwide for trade secret is Coca-Cola's formulation for the Coke, which is very valuable. And apart from all those, China also has a so-called anti-unfair competition laws, which covers basically everything, like from passing off, counterfeiting, trade secret, or unethical advertising. Yeah, it's like a catch-all law for all kinds of IP behaviors. And also China has a anti-monopoly law. So these are relevant if, for example, the big pharma companies, when they do deals, for example, a licensing deal, they must be very careful not to violate any monopoly provisions in China. So having talked about the IP rights and the tools, so how do we enforce them? It's another topic that many Western companies, European companies are interested. So here is a typical IP enforcement options, which I list about seven of them. So if you are familiar with China, you might have heard of a so-called dual track protection. A dual track means two ways. That means in Europe, when your IP rights is infringed, you normally only have one option. You just go to the court for litigation. That's certainly available in China called civil litigation with the court. But another track is you can also go to the local IP office to file a complaint. That is called an administrative action. So both actions are so-called dual track protection, and they have pros and cons for each. I think for a complex like a drug patent dispute, you normally should go to the court because the judges can understand the topic. But if it's like a trademark counterfeiting or copyright infringement, sometimes it's quicker and maybe cheaper to go to a local IP office with a complaint. And the other options like criminal action with the police for blatant high-profile IP infringement. And Chinese customs actually are very effective. Chinese customs are very proactive and can stop infringement goods in the border. But the prerequisite is that you must record your IP with Chinese customs first. And we also have warning letters, which are normally used to warn infringers in the first place before we go to a court proceeding. And if you go to trade fairs, especially those big trade fairs, like the Canton Fair, you can also file complaints at trade fairs if you find infringing products. And with today's marketplace online, like Alibaba or Amazon, you can also file online complaints with Alibaba, for example, to take down infringing links. So those are the common ways to enforce IP rights in China. And also, IP is not only about enforcement litigation. It's also about how do you use them in the form of how do you license, how do you transfer technology. So those are like IP rights can be licensed or assigned in China, as in Europe, it's mainly a contractual agreement. But one thing to remember for IP assignment, which means either you acquire IP from other people or you sell your IP to other people, you must record your IP assignment with the China IP office. Without that recordal, that IP transfer is actually not complete and not recognized by law. So that's something you need to bear in mind. And for transfer of technology cross-border, China has some 3 categories of technology. One is prohibited, which means this technology cannot be transferred cross-border. And there's a restricted category, which means that you can transfer those technology cross-border, but you must get a permission certificate from the Chinese government. And there's a freely transferable technology. For biopharma, I would say the majority are certainly freely transferred technology. I think some of the genetic engineering technology for certain diseases might be restricted. You might have to get a permit from the Chinese Ministry of Commerce or Science to transfer it. And maybe some Chinese herbal medicine, which are valued as a national treasure and really cannot be transferred. And finally, with the overview, I want to touch on a topic for the recent Chinese patent law, a new law, which just came effect in June this year, so 3 months away. So this new law has two important highlights for biopharma. I think that's because I think in the past, China is kind of being viewed as maybe more favorable to the generic drug companies, and less favorable to the innovator drug companies for patents. And this is changing, as the first speaker, Mr. Canepa, has pointed out. China is changing from imitation to innovation very quickly. And also, China is facing pressure mainly from the USA, I think, on patent protection for innovators. So if you remember, before COVID, China and the US had a big trade war, and some of the elements of the trade war is about IP protection for innovator drugs. So with that background, China has revised patent law, and for biopharma, the first revisement is that just for drug patents, patent term can be extended. So normally the patent term is 20 years protection, as we know, but for drug patents, it's possible to extend to 25 years, so 5 years more maximum. So why? That's because the drugs will have to be approved by FDA to be on the market, and that delays the market process of the drug. And to compensate that delay, this 5-year protection extension is granted to drug patents, which is good news for the innovator drugs. The other big change is a so-called patent linkage system, which is a very complex system. I want to go into detail here. It's mainly inherited from the US system. So basically, it's to link the FDA approval with the patent dispute. Because in the past, when an innovator drug company wants to sue a generic drug company, they can only wait until the generic drug is on the market, being approved by FDA. And with this linkage system, now the innovator drug company can sue the generic drug company as early as during FDA approval process. So that can settle the dispute earlier and gives the innovator earlier chance to initiate a lawsuit against generics. So again, can be favorable to the innovator drug companies. So we have done an overview of the IP law landscape in China. So let's look at the patents. So that's the second agenda, because patents is probably the most important IP rights for biopharma, given the huge investment, huge risk of R&D, and the protection is needed badly from patents. So let's look at some details. So I mentioned that China has 3 categories of patents: invention, utility model, and design. And utility model is a bit unique. It's like a small invention. It can be used to protect a product with a mechanical structure or shape. So these are normally not useful for drug patents, like chemical compounds or compositions, but it can be used for medical device. And actually many medical device companies use that because they can obtain a protection through utility model quickly and cheaply. And it can be granted within 1 year, which is really quick. But for emission patents, you need to wait for 2 to 4 years to get a patent right. So that's a highlight, or maybe some tool you can consider for patents. And here is a list of common subject matters for patent protection. You can see it covers very broadly from the compound to the composition to the medical use, the process of manufacture, and medical device. These are all can be protected by patents. And because biopharma is such a big field, in the patent law, there are some special provisions about biopharma patents. So here I list 5 examples. I have already mentioned about patent term extension and patent linkage system. So here I'll just pick another 3. So a unique aspect of biopharma patents. The first one is the subject matter. Not all technology in the biopharma can be patented. So the method of diagnosis or the method of treating disease is not patentable in China. The same is in Europe, but they are patentable in the USA. So the rationale is mainly to give doctors the freedom to choose whatever way to trace the patient without worrying about patent infringement. And lastly, there's a compulsory licensing as well. So if your patent is of emergency need for national security or public health, then this can be, the government can compulsory license your patents to anyone in need. So this almost reminds me of now, I think with COVID, I think maybe 2 or 3 months ago, even in the US, the Biden government has announced that they will support almost like a compulsory licensing of all COVID-related vaccine patents to aid global war against COVID. So this is the kind of compulsory licensing that Biden wants to introduce for all vaccine patents. But I'm not sure whether this really can go through in the USA. But anyway, compulsory license can happen with drug patents, although in China has not given any compulsory license to any drug patents ever since the China had a patent system. So we should wait and see whether China will follow the US or the Biden's announcement about compulsory licensing of vaccine patents for COVID. And we talked a lot about the laws and the principles. So let's look at some case studies. So for patents, I'll share 2 case studies. So the first one, we'll talk about the famous drug, remdesivir. So remdesivir, we will mainly look at their patent filing strategy, how they can effectively protect a single product with many patents or a portfolio. So remdesivir is a famous drug mainly because last year, it was once hoped to be the magical drug for treating COVID. Although later testing shows that remdesivir, it can be useful, but not as magical or dramatic as people have hoped to treat COVID. But anyway, I think it's still useful to look at how remdesivir, the drug, is protected by patents. So here's the structure of their chemical structure, and remdesivir is actually the first treatment for COVID to be granted by US FDA. So here is a table which I summarized how remdesivir, the drug, is protected by patents. So you can see that broadly from 2008 to 2019, 11 years, the patentee has filed about 14 patents covering different aspects of the drug. So you shouldn't think it's only one chemical compound, there's only one patent. No, actually there can be as many as 14 patents for that drug. And also they don't file it in 1 year, they file it over 11 years. From the first year, 2008, the basic compounds, the core patent with the compound all the way down, they will protect the compound, they will protect the intermediate for making the compound, and they will protect the medical use for treating different diseases, and they also will protect the different dosage forms of the drug. So you can say it's a comprehensive protection with 14 patents with over 11 years. And with 11 years, it effectively extends the life cycle of the remdesivir drug by 11 years. Even though maybe the first drug patent has expired, the improvement of the drug patent is still in force. So that's a way to illustrate how big pharma can protect a patent, can protect a drug with many patents. So a second case study is a patent infringement case for medical device. So it's a litigation case. So here, the medical device in dispute is, as the picture showed, is a medical device for liver fibrosis assessment. And the plaintiff is called Ecosense, is a French company in that area. And the defendant is called Heisky, a Suzhou company in China based in Suzhou, also in the liver detection assessment area. And they have dispute on this patent. I think Ecosense believes that Heisky has infringed their patent, which is called imaging method and the device using shearing waves. So here is this is a quite high-profile medical device dispute in the last 4 years, and here is the timeline and the case history about this litigation. So very, very briefly, in February 2016, Ecosense sued Heisky for patent infringement before the Beijing IP court. So it's worth noting that now China has 3 specialized IP courts in Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou, and those IP courts are very experienced with litigation and are very much favored by the Western companies. And after 3 years, I think Beijing IP court finally found infringement of Heisky and ordered the damages, quite high damages of 30 million RMB or close to 4 million euros. So it's quite a high damage for medical device dispute. But the story does not end here. I think later, Heisky appealed the Beijing IP court decision to the China Supreme Court. And in the end, the China Supreme Court has overturned the Beijing IP court decision and found no infringement based on a difference in a technical concept. So I have chosen this case, although this is a case which the French company ultimately didn't win the case, but I chose this case for 2 reasons. One is that if you look at the judgment, whether from Beijing IP court or from the China Supreme Court, you can see the quality of judgment is very high, and the judges are very sophisticated with a very complex patent dispute. So you can be assured that China, unlike many media in the West, has portrayed, has very bad judgment because lack of experience. It's not. China is getting really experienced with IP trials, especially with the big courts. And second reason I chose this case is a high damage, because also in the Western media, sometimes China is portrayed as very low damage for IP protection. That may be true maybe 10 years ago, but the damages are getting higher and higher. And this is an illustration of the high damage you can get with the Beijing IP court. And there are many cases of even higher damages in China. So China is no longer a low damage country. So we talked about patent right and patent enforcement, and then we move on to the third agenda, which covers about how do we minimize risks of trade secret. So trade secret is very broad and is useful in biopharma. It can be any information from technical know-how to business information like your customer lists or your pricing or the margins those can all be classified as trade secret, but it must fulfill 3 criteria. So it must be secret, which is obvious. It must be unknown to the public, and it must have commercial value. Otherwise, there's no need to protect it. And perhaps most importantly, the owner must demonstrate that they have measures to safeguard the trade secret. So here, what are the pros and cons of trade secret? So the pros of trade secret might be you don't have to register with the China IP office for your trade secret because it's a secret. So as long as you keep it secret, then it belongs to you. There's, unlike patents or trademarks, you have to register it with the IP office. And also another advantage is that as long as you can keep it a trade secret, then it lasts forever. As I mentioned, Coca-Cola's formulation of the drink is a long-kept secret. So what are the maybe burdens of trade secret? So the burdens is, the first burden is that you must have a lot of tools to ensure it is a secret. Some of them are the legal tools. For example, you should have NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, to keep your trade secret if you discuss that with your partners or suppliers in China. And you must have like something like a non-competing clauses and all kinds of confidentiality terms with your employees, right? For example, to ensure that they will know these are secret and they shouldn't breach the secret. And another burden of trade secret is that if it's breached, then it's lost forever. It's no longer secret. So let's look at a case study. So this is a case study between Eli Lilly, the famous drug company, and Mr. Huang, who is a former employee of Eli Lilly. So this is the first preliminary injunction case for trade secret. So if you are not familiar with the term, preliminary injunction means that the plaintiff can sue the defendant and ask the court to give an order to stop the defendant from infringing even before the court had a trial of the case. So this is mainly used for emergency measures and can be very valuable for trade secret. And Eli Lilly versus Huang is the first, we call it PI case for trade secret. So basically, the case is about Eli Lilly has found that its former employee, Mr. Huang, has stored or saved 28 pieces of trade secret on his personal device. So Eli Lilly quickly sued Huang in the Shanghai IP court and requested preliminary injunction. And Shanghai court did grant the PI, the preliminary injunction, consider the facts. So Eli Lilly was able to prevent the breach of the trade secret and also get damages as well. So this is a very good example of that a company can prevent trade secret through litigation in China. And another lesson I think is that over 90% of trade secret breach is through your employees. So how do you manage employees, and how do you manage employees when they resign is a very important topic and a measure to ensure that your trade secret is protected. So now let's move on to the final agenda, which is we will briefly look at trademarks because company and product brand are important. So basically, the message here is that China is basically the first to file country. So whoever files first of their IP rights will enjoy the IP rights normally. And for trademarks, that's even more true. The message here is that you must file your trademarks in China to enjoy any protection of trademark rights. So for example, if you are from Western countries, you might want to rely on some like a common law rights if it's a common law country, or if you want to rely on unregistered trademark rights through use. Those are concepts not really recognized or really useful in China. In China, those certificates, which I showed here on the left, those paper certificates showing that you have rights, that's all important. You must register first. And this is an example of all kinds of trademarks. Basically, all the words, designs, pictures, even the 3D shapes, colors, and even sound can be used as a trademark in China. So it's very broad. And trademark is not only about the mark, the logo, it's also about the products or services. And when you register trademarks, you must designate what kind of products you want protection. And here I list 3 major classes of products which are useful for biopharma. So in China, China adopts the so-called niche classification for products and services. There are 45 classes in total, and there are usually 3 classes which are key for biopharma. So class 5 is mainly for medicine, pharmaceuticals, and class 10 is mainly relevant to medical device, and class 14 is mainly relevant for medical service. So if you are going to register your trademark in China, consider register class 5, class 10, and class 44. And also here, I also want to highlight the importance of the Chinese translation of your brand, because very often, if you are going to operate in China for a long time, Chinese consumers will devise a Chinese translation of your brand, and that Chinese translation can be more popular than the English version. So you need to protect the Chinese translation of your brand. So here's an example of the big company in the US, Procter & Gamble. They have a Chinese translation of their English brand for every brand they have. So to further illustrate the importance of Chinese translation of your Latin brand, so here's another case study in the biopharma sector. It's a very famous FiveYear case, which is an old case but still useful case to illustrate the importance of Chinese translation. So we all know a Pfizer company, they have this famous drug, FiveYear, and it's also very famous in China. But in China, no one knows FiveYear, those English words. And in fact, the Chinese media actually devised a Chinese nickname for FiveYear, which is basically called Big Brother, or 伟哥 in Chinese. So as you can imagine, this has become hugely popular and easily memorable name for FiveYear. So people all know Big Brother. No one knows FiveYear. And when Pfizer realized that it's too late, a Chinese company has already registered the Big Brother trademark. And even though Pfizer had a 7-year legal battle with the Chinese company, it finally cannot get the Chinese translation back as a brand. So in the end, Pfizer has to devise another Chinese translation for FiveYear and starting a marketing campaign in China to promote the awareness of that new Chinese translation. So as you can imagine, those are costly for Pfizer. And that illustrates the importance of a Chinese translation of your brand, and you should register your Chinese translation brand as well as a trademark in China. So we covered the overview of IP, patents for drugs, trade secret, and trademark for brands. So in conclusion, here are my takeaway messages for the audience. So firstly, in China, registration is the king. So you might have heard this many times. It's almost like a cliche, but it's not a cliche. It's very, really important. With your core IP rights, if you can't, you must register in China as quickly as possible. Otherwise, someone else will register it, and it can be costly and difficult to remove that. So do register your IP rights in China as quickly as possible. There are many lessons to be learned here. And secondly, as we can see from the remdesivir drug case, it's very important to develop a huge portfolio to protect one product. Don't rely on one patent. You need to have different patents for important product. And for medical devices, you can protect it in China not only with invention patents, but also consider utility model, which can be cheaper and quicker to obtain in China, and design patents. These can all be used for medical device. And for trademarks, it's important to realize the Chinese translation of the brand and do register the Chinese translation of your brand as a trademark in China. And for trade secrets, I think the message here is that you can protect trade secrets in China through litigation, but to prevent the risk, it's also important to manage, especially your employees and also your current employees, and when they resign, how do you manage your trade secrets with them? It's an important topic. And finally, as both speakers, me and Mr. Canepa has illustrated, China has developed very quickly. The IP protection is getting better and better. China is becoming very sophisticated with IP registration and enforcement. It's not like a black hole, as some Western media has portrayed, that you really cannot register or protect IP in China. It's different now. And if your company is going to be operating in China for a long time, you must be willing or brave to engage with the Chinese system. And then you must be prepared to register and enforce your IP rights in China. And you will find that it's really operable, and you can learn a lot from here. So yeah, so that's all. Thank you for this opportunity to speak, and I'm happy to take any questions from the audience.
Thank you very much, Dr. Xu, and I would invite all the participants to get in touch with the IP SME Help Desk, which again provides free assistance to all SME, European SMEs that have any IP questions, issues, that have a lot of resources, guides, and a team of experts like Dr. Xu who are available to answer your questions. So thank you again, Dr. Xu, for the excellent presentation. I would like to make one small comment, since it is something that we have encountered at the EU SME Centre. I think at the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned that there is a catalog from the Ministry of Science and Technology and MOFCOM about the technologies which are prohibited, restricted, or allowed to be imported and exported. I would like to say that the catalog is different for imports and exports. So it means that maybe you are free to import one technology, but then you are not free to export it back to Europe in case you will need to do it in the future. So this is something, and we have encountered this issue with a company from Europe. So make sure that you are fully aware of this before introducing your technology in China. And of course, at the SME Center, but also at the help desk, we can help you check eventually these catalogs and see whether the technology is in one or both catalogs. So I will now start with the Q&A. There are some questions already in the chat, but I would like to go back to the previous question that I asked to Mr. Canepa about the procurement and how feasible it is, especially for companies. Or the main audience here are small and medium-sized enterprises who often don't have a presence in China or are just starting to have it. So is this centralized procurement something that European small and medium-sized enterprises should aim for? Is it convenient? Is it easy? Does it provide any profit at all? Or what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, we need to say that VBP is not something that we are looking for. I mean, VBP is coming, you need to have two conditions. One, you need to have at least 3 products from the same molecule. If you are not having 3 products, doesn't matter if it is the original plus 2 generic or 3 generic, doesn't matter. If you are not having 3, you are not in, for the national one at least. Then the second condition, which is not written anywhere, but is the size of the business. Although we have seen few cases of molecules of quite limited size in terms of value in the market that were included, especially in the second round, first or second round, I would say the government is pretty smart and they know where the money is, and this is where they go for. So I wouldn't talk about VBP as a way to enter the market. You need to enter the market with possibly innovative products. And if they're really innovative, they're covered by IP, then you don't need to worry about the VBP because that's not going to be applied to your product. So the question you're posing is a very important one, but is not applying to every case. Now, if you want to know for a company that is already in the market and who is, which is having maybe a good market share of a certain molecule and is making a good idea or not to make an offer, try to win, my answer would be, it depends, because if you already have a way to sell outside the usual channels, for instance, there is certain drugs which are already sold a lot in the OTC, so not through the hospital, but directly at the retail pharmacies, out of pocket. There is many drugs which are prescribed more in the low-end part of the healthcare system, which is either the hospital class 1 or the small outpatient center, the small health center of the communities. Everywhere in China there is this kind of situation. If the today use is mostly through this channel, then VBP is not an issue because this is not included in the VBP hospitals. So it's not one answer for everyone. It depends which type of product, depends on the level of innovation. And so I wouldn't be so worried unless you have only very old products, you only sell in the hospitals, and you don't have any alternative. Then, and you have a large market share, then yes, you are in trouble. But if you have a low market share, paradoxically, you will gain market share, although maybe with a very low price. So then also economy of scale will play a game. If you have a very large economy of scale, then your cost of goods will be lower, then you can compete, maybe even win against the Chinese competitors.
Thank you very much for this great and detailed answer. I will move to the following questions. There is, good morning. I would like to know where to find or which are the regulations about the biopharma products to enter China. I guess, just go to the website of the competent authorities, National Health Commission, National Medical Products Commission, National Healthcare Security Administration, and many others. I think you will need probably quite a few days of work and analysis to go through all these regulations. But maybe unless you have maybe more specific questions on specific regulations, then I would move on to the next question, which is for Dr. Xu. Does the Chinese law provide for compensation for compulsory licensing? So I think we're talking about,
I think we missed about compulsory licensing, but I think it's worth mentioning that as I said, China has a patent system since 1985. It has not granted any compulsory licensing yet, so there's no precedent. So in principle, yes, I think the government should provide some compensation to the biopharma companies. Their patents are being licensed compulsorily, but there's no precedent in China. And I think China is doing this well because compulsory licensing must be treated very carefully, because otherwise it will beat the purpose of patent system, and the biopharma companies will lack any incentive or to apply for patents. if their investment and their risk are not respected. So I think yes, the principle, yes, the government should provide some compensation, but because there's no precedent and China has not done any compulsory licensing yet, so we don't have actually a case to talk about. But it's kind of interesting to say if the Biden's idea, Biden support compulsory licensing of COVID vaccine patents in the USA, and if that does get approved by Congress in the US, how Biden government should compensate those companies like Pfizer or like so that can be a good precedent. But let's wait and see.
Thank you, Dr. Xu. And there's also one comment in the chat on this. I invite you all to read it. I will move to the next question, which is again for Mr. Canepa. Is the establishment of the Hainan Free Trade Zone considering interesting for the pharmaceutical companies, and what is it possible to forecast about the impact of this zone? Maybe a little bit of background. Pharmaceuticals, the Hainan Free Trade Zone is allowing the import, the registration of many foreign pharmaceuticals, and I think this is also in line with an overall trend of there are also other free trade zones in China which allow foreign drugs to be imported by a cross-border e-commerce, Henan, Beijing free trade zones. Mr. Canepa, what are your thoughts on this?
First of all, we need to understand that this is not just for pharmaceutical. The free trade zone and in general, the special incentive that the government put together to attract companies in Hainan Island are not just for healthcare and not just for biopharma. This is a general policy. The government is trying to develop the area, and there is public information about this. I mean, again, we need to remember that the Chinese government is extremely clear in the communication. They always tell us what they want to do, and they tell us well in advance, and then they do it. So we knew already this was coming, and is coming. So it's true, for instance, for luxury. I mean, luxury now, Hainan is one of the island of luxury, I would say today. And many people that used to travel all around the world, now they're going there to buy stuff that they used to buy somewhere else. So yes, there is some advantages. Now, one big advantage, which is again, not just for biopharma, but for other categories of products or other kind of business, is the reduction of the taxes. There is a very big reduction of taxes, both for corporate income tax as well for individual income tax. And this is pretty interesting, and many companies actually consider to move there, but they really need to move. It's not just a question of opening a little office there. You really need to have certain type of presence there if you want to enjoy some of these advantages. For the registration, yes, it is easier. One of the reasons for which China is doing this because they want to create in Hainan Island a place for medical tourism. So they want to compete with Thailand, which is today one of the most important destinations in Asia for medical tourism, as well with Japan, where many Chinese used to go, for instance, for the issues related to fertility, and as well with Dubai, which try to be also a hub for medical tourism in the Middle East and Asia. So there is a plan. Now with the COVID, obviously, is more complicated, but the plan is there. Maybe it's a little bit slowing down, but that's a plan. So if you go there, then you may have technology that you cannot find in mainland China. Why? Because they don't target the mainland China, simple people, average people. They target people that can go there, pay more, and also people from other countries that are interested to go to a very nice place. Hainan Island is a tropical island, very touristic one, and they can enjoy at the same time medical and tourism.
Thank you, Valtero. I would invite, if there are any other questions, please, this is your time to ask them. I see a follow-up question for Dr. Xu. It's in a Q&A, but basically,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I thought that it is about the patent invalidation question, right? Yeah, so I think that, yeah, the question about, are you familiar with the issue of patent trolls in the pharma sector in China? Example, frequent patent invalidations by Chinese companies that allow them to use generic products. So I saw this question, so I will answer that. Yeah. So I think, so first I think patent trolls, they are mainly appearing, we are familiar with patent trolls but mainly in the telecom sector, they are a phenomenon. Patent trolls mainly in the telecom sector, not so much in the biopharma sector, because we don't have that number of patents. But for telecom, they have many patents with standards, so that's quite common. But I think you are talking about many Chinese companies will try to invalidate the foreign companies' patents in China for drugs. I think that's also true. I think in the past, many Chinese companies are generic companies, and they try to invalidate the foreign pharma companies' patents in China so that they can operate. And it used to be the chance of invalidation can be quite high, especially for chemical drugs. The drugs with chemical compounds, the invalidation rate can be as high as, I think, statistically 40% or 50%, or nearly half of the patents are invalidated. But if it's a biotech drug, genetic engineering biotech drug, I think it's actually not very easy to invalidate statistically. So I think that has some links with, in the past, as I mentioned, China's patent law can be seen as favorable to the generic drug companies. But I think with the new law, as you can see very clear, the message here is to, maybe achieve the balance between protection of innovator drug companies and the generic drug companies, and there are drives from both China domestically, because many Chinese companies are shifting to innovation, as Mr. Canepa has observed. So they need protection of their innovator drugs in China. And also, as I mentioned, the US-China trade war, US has very big pressure on China on that. So I think in the future, there are still a lot of patent invalidation dispute in China, but maybe the battlefield can be maybe more fair. Should be the patent invalidation rate may not be as high as before, and we should expect that the patent disputes for biopharma can be more complex and more more fair. Especially if you go to the Beijing IP court, Shanghai IP court, or the Guangdong IP court, those big courts. So I think, yeah. So that's my answer.
Thank you. And there is actually also another question for you, Dr. Xu, which is a follow-up of the previous question. Is there any workaround for forced technology transfer policy, how to circumvent this? Follow-up comment is opening a company here is very expensive, especially for SMEs. So
I'm sorry, I haven't. Yeah, can you repeat the question?
Yes, it's in the, if you click on the Q&A button on the bottom of the screen, there is a follow-up question to the one that was asked before.
Okay, forced technology transfer is a component. Yeah, I'm not very clear.
The previous one, sorry, the previous one.
Okay.
Yes.
Compulsory licensing.
Yes,
is there any workarounds for China's forced technology transfer policy? Putting up a manufacturing company in China can maybe. I think we need more details as to define what is a forced technology transfer. Yeah, I'm actually not familiar with the term forced transfer policy. Yeah. So,
I think it's related to what was mentioned before about compulsory licensing.
Oh, compulsory license. Yeah.
Yes.
So, but I mentioned that I think in the past, China has not given any compulsory license yet. Yeah. So if you are talking about the compulsory license, yeah, it's there. The principle is there, but China has not actually done it since 1985. Yeah. So if you are talking about other type of forced transfer, I think unless I I think the transfer of technology is really a contractual agreement. It's not really someone can enforce a forced transfer of technology, but we need to look at the details about what you are referring, why it is forced, and whether it's really violating any contractual freedom or local or just monopoly rules.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Xu. We are approaching the end of this webinar. Maybe if we put the slide, I would like, again, we cover many topics, and of course there were all the participants. You're free to contact the speakers directly. There were the contact details at the end of the slides. You're also very welcome to get in touch with us and the IP SME help desk, or if you are SMEs based in Italy, you can get in touch with the Italian Chamber or Confindustria Lombardia, the Cluster of Life Sciences in Lombardia, and us Lombarda, who are the co-organizers of this workshop today. You are very welcome to do so. One very last point, we have, if you scan this QR code here, we have, it's a short survey that we would invite you to fill. We have to organize 12 workshops more within the next few months. So if you have any suggestions for possible topics for future workshops, if you have any ideas about things that we could do together, please, you can propose them in this form. So I would like to, final reminder, the recording of this webinar will be uploaded on YouTube, and next slide, please. These are, yes, all content information, and thanks again to all the participants for your attention. We hope this was very useful. I personally found it extremely interesting with two very senior professionals, and thanks to both speakers for being with us today, and we hope that we could do other events together with you. Thank you all, and goodbye. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.